it's really easy when we're raising our kids to get so focused in the moment that we don't spend enough time thinking about the future and where we're headed. And I want you to know that I think everything we do, that while as they get older, our picture of the future may get more focused, it's important for us to understand that our kids are going to reach adulthood. And then what? What will we do? And so it really doesn't matter where we are on the age spectrum. We need to have at least one eye toward the future, thinking about what's life going to look like. And before we get too far into that, I want us to remember that I have a few rules of the game that I want us to remember. The first is that parents know best, but they don't know everything. So, and what that means for me is that we should be courageous in speaking up on our family's behalf in any setting. The second is that it should provide us with the humility to recognize that there are experts in the room that know more about a lot of other things than I know, which allows me to listen well. The second rule is that parents need to educate themselves to be healthy advocates. And I emphasize the word healthy. Knowing the rules, knowing the law to the degree that we need to, so that we advocate for things that are actually legitimate, not just what somebody's told us we need to fight for. It's really important. It also helps with our credibility in a setting of experts that we have done our part to educate ourselves, to be a part of that conversation. And then the third rule is that we have to take care of ourselves. Karen and I spend a lot of time talking about the fact that this is a marathon and not a sprint. And if we're in the elementary grades, congratulations, you're at about mile 3. Okay. I don't know if you've ever seen like the Boston Marathon, and at the beginning of the race, you see the trail of people that go back from the start line. There's like 30,000 or some huge number of people. And I'm thinking, wow, those people at the back of the line, they actually have to run like 28 miles, right? Because they go forever before they get to the start line. And I would say if you're in early childhood, you're in the back of that pack. So pace yourself because it's a long journey. The fourth is that we have to nurture a sense of humor. We have to be able to laugh. And one of the ways that I can kind of tell where parents are in the emotional journey with their kids is when I tell a Haley story, whether or not they laugh. Because, and the truth is, some of the things that Haley does are funny only because she has special needs. And if you're kind of in that anger or frustrated stage with your children, you'll be a little offended that I'm laughing at my own child. But if you're laughing with me, it's a pretty good indication that you're in a decent space. And that's where I want us to be. A word of warning, and we talked about it in a previous session, that if you're stuck in survival, you'll never stop and think about what's ahead. So if you're stuck there, how do you plan? And what we know is it's coming, whether we're ready for it or not. And I hear a lot of parents who really wrestle with the idea and their language is they fought so hard for their kids in school. And then they get to adulthood and they're exhausted and a lot of the support structures fall away. And they're like, what did we fight so hard for? And I don't want you to get there. I want you to be in that space where the school years were the launching pad for a great adulthood. And I want to give you some encouragement in the next few minutes to try to help you do that. So I have a question for you. If there were no services, what would you do? This is a question that I think is important because even though we have services are limited, right? We all know this. The waiting list for most services for kids with special needs is so long that some of us may never receive them. Well, so if the services aren't there, what do we do? Well, I would like to think that most of us would not go into a corner, shrivel up in a ball, and just wait for life to pass us by. I think most of us would do what we could to figure it out, right? And that's why this conversation is so important, because I think regardless of how many services you have, the key to the best possible life is to have a big and vibrant community that supports the vision for Haley. And when we have that big community in place, there are people that are there to help us, so parents don't burn out as fast. Um, they get to work in their expertise, and other people get to support us. And the best part of that is we get to see how many people love Haley Thompson just because they have a heart for her and no other reason. And that is just so, so good for us to get to see. So over the next few minutes, I just want to spend time talking about how do we build a team, and who's on your team. And I run into a couple of things here that people express as fears as to why they don't do more things. And one of those things is just flat fear. What happens if? Are you ever afraid that someone's going to take advantage of Haley? And the answer is yes and no. Could it happen? Sure. It happens every day. Okay. But the truth is that we take a risk getting out of bed every morning, right? And not to be flippant about it. And people say, yeah, but our kids with special needs, they have more challenges and less ability to report and get help and all of those things. And I would say, yes. But what we have found in almost 32 years of life with Haley is that, yes, there are some bad people in the world. And there are way more good people. Way more. And the truth is that there are tons of people who will love your children if you just give them the chance to. But if we live in fear, we will keep them so sheltered that we'll never know. And the longer we live in that fear, the bigger and darker and scarier the world gets. I just want to believe that the world's really full of great people, and we've seen it in the life of Haley. So my question for you this morning would be, who's on your team? And even how do you know? How do you know who you need and what you need for your team? How do you know the services that you need, and what can you do without? And if we start to looking at that, we're able to say yes and no to things. Well, how do we know what we need? We go back to that dream that we talked about earlier, and then what needs to happen, and who are those people that we need in place to make that happen, and we go about engaging those people. Over the last year and a half, because of the pandemic, we've seen this over and over, right? That out of fear, people not knowing how long something's going to last or how long we see people hoarding things, right? And in the process, they leave people who need some of those things with the inability to get them. Well, if we know what we need and we know how much we need, do we need to hoard? No, we can say yes and we can say no. And I hear it in advocacy training for parents with ARD meetings to just ask for everything you can get. Right? I'm sure you've experienced that no matter where you sit. And I just wonder why. Why not have a dream that's focused so that you can say yes to this? And if you can give something to someone else who needs it, why not do that? And what I have found in my experience is that when I only ask for the things I need and I say no thank you to the things I don't, I rarely get told no for the things that I need. And it's not because I do this for a living. It's not because the school likes me better. It's because they know I've done the homework to know what I need and what I can do without. How do you think your meetings would go if you only asked for the things that you need? So first thing I want to do before I start talking about team and building team is just to be really clear. This is not my team. It's Haley's team. And that's really important because that's where the focus needs to be. And the truth is, I need to have a working relationship with you if you're on Haley's team, but I don't need you to care about me. I need you to care about the vision for Haley. And I need you to be committed to her and in doing your part, whatever it is, to making that happen. It's really easy for us as parents to get enmeshed in our kids' lives. And you can hear it in people's language, right? So Karen had to take Haley to a doctor's appointment yesterday. Who had the doctor's appointment? Haley did. But if we're enmeshed as parents, what do we say? Who had the doctor's appointment? We do. We went to the doctor. We had this. We have to have surgery. No, we don't. Haley does. We're just getting her there, right? It's Haley's life and it's her team. And sometimes we just use that as a figure of speech. But I think it's important to kind of listen for it because it tells us, are we over identifying with our kids? I don't even need people on Haley's team to like me. I just need them to share our vision. And as Haley gets older, I need to be including her more and more in letting her shape her vision for her life. Okay. So I've never tried to do this in this setting. I'm usually doing this in person. But I'd love for you, if you're watching this, to take a blank piece of paper, turn it to landscape, and I want you to draw your team. And if you see up there, you see a little smiley face on one side and on the left-hand side, and that's where we are today. And the smiley face on the right-hand side is where we picture Haley being in the future. And then the circle in the middle is a place to draw lines for everybody that is currently on her team. Okay, so who's on Haley's team? Well, she has family. She has friends. She has the West Texas A&M volleyball team. She has her boss at the Southwest Montessori School. She has her boss at the Turn Center in Amarillo. She has a brother and a sister-in-law, and all of these people are on her team. Okay, almost none of those people were on her team 20 years ago. When she was in elementary school, that team would have looked like Miss Mack, her special ed teacher. It would have looked like Mr. Bigham, her principal. It would have looked like her parents and her brother, of course, her grandparents. But that team would have been shaped and looked very different. Now, the one thing that you recognize is I list those people. Who are the constants in that team? It's her family. And because we're the constant, we should have more to contribute. We should have a bigger, broader perspective, but we still need to listen to those people who don't know her as well, but bring a special expertise to the conversation. So if I was to ask you to draw your team, who would be on those lines off of that big circle? And then based on what you have envisioned for her or him in the future, who do we need to add? Who's on the team that doesn't share your vision? What do you do with that? Well, as they get older and it's more of a volunteer thing, if people don't share the vision, we can just kind of let them go. When they're younger and in school, what happens when we have a school person that doesn't share our vision? We do the best we can, right? And we're going to let them serve in their role and accomplish what they can to help us toward the vision, whether they're fully bought in or not. So we get to this place of asking who's missing. And my answer, it's a great counseling answer, is it depends. Depends on where you're trying to go. Which brings us back to where we started, which is the dream and the vision. We can only know who we need when we know where we're headed, right? And then the last question I would ask, is there anyone on your team who disagrees with you? And if the answer is no, I would tell you that your team is not healthy. Because what Haley needs to reach her potential is not for me to surround myself with a bunch of yes men and women. It's to bring a group of people who have a different expertise than mine, who will see her through a little different lens, so that it shapes and moves her in a direction that I might never see on my own. And when we do that, then we've created the best possible team for her. And we recognize that we have tons of agreement, and we just see things a little differently. When we have that, then we get her to where she wants to be. So I want to encourage you. We don't do this alone. And I watch people who try to do this alone, and I find them burned out. And my language is, I find them in the ditch. And our kids cannot afford for us as their parents, their caregivers, to end up in the ditch. So find a team, find that group of people who loves her just because, and want to help her reach her best possible life, and engage them and use them in a healthy way.